people are starting to talk about moves of the past. And there's been a lot of talk this week about the bad moves of the Sixers process era. So everyone Sixers Twitter has been kind of weighing in on different things they've seen over the years, and everyone's talking about which one they thought was the worst move. But if you could change one move from the past, which would you choose? I got the 4 that were most mentioned online. Okay, so choosing Ben Simmons over Brandon Ingram, handling Fultz differently, now whether it be drafting him or that be his whole shooting woes that he had in the yips, not trading Jimmy Butler, trading Zaire Smith for Mikal Bridges, trading Drew Holiday for Nerlens Noel, which jump-started the process, and then signing Tobias Harris to his deal. Which of these moves would you, if you could take out one, would be the one you take out from the past 8 years, I guess?
Well, when you say Fultz, can you talk about what actually really happened?
Please.
Didn't we trade down? Didn't we trade that pick?
We traded down to, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we traded up to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we could have drafted
Tatum. Yeah. But I heard that we couldn't, part of that deal was you're trading up to 1 to take Fultz. That's it.
Which I never really understood that whole thing. I remember reading that, but I never
understand how you can how you can just do that.
Because imagine if you and I were trading and you were like, hey, do you know who you want? And I'm like, yeah, I know who I want. Do you want Fultz? No, I don't want Fultz. Okay, I'm worried about the Lakers taking Fultz. Could I trade up to 1? Okay, but you have to take him because we have a guy we want and we think he'll be there at 3. Okay, deal. You know what I mean? Like something like that.
Yeah, that's what they tell you, but I wouldn't believe that. I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't believe that. I just know how that stuff go. If you can't put that in the trade deal, you can't put that language in there. I don't believe it.
There's also an apparent
unless
deal
unless the language was in that, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
So that would be your number 1 then, obviously, right?
Yes.
Not taking Tatum at number 1. Okay. Yeah. That's a good one. I mean, yeah, that's a good one. I guess that falls under the entire.
It's 2 things because 1, he would be with Philly, and 2, he wouldn't be with Boston.
Yeah. Yep.
And who's been a thorn since he's arrived.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very true. There was also another a rumor deal. We didn't want to put it on here because it wasn't official, but there were always a lot of rumors behind the Sixers were offered a high draft pick for Jahlil Okafor. And the rumors were it was Boston and that pick that eventually would have been, I think, 3 overall. So we could have had 1 and 3 in that draft. So that would have been, we could have got Fultz and could have had Tatum. Imagine that. Yeah, trading. I mean, drafting. We talked about that too. Drafting Jahlil at 3 could have been on there, but we looked at the top 10. The top 10 was pretty rough that year, so there's not many places you really could have gone besides like Porzingis. But you remember back then,
Jahlil coming out of college was a legit pick.
Yeah,
but with Embiid though,
but it was just all the other guys that you had there. You had to go a different way.
Yeah.
The
only guy would be Porzingis. You could have taken, but Porzingis refused to work out for the Sixers that year. That was a big deal. You could even throw another honorable mention on here and say Doc Rivers throwing Ben Simmons under the bus after the Atlanta series, because that changed a lot of stuff too. That team essentially broke up after that. Like, that was like they were done, right? I mean, they never played together again, really. So,
yeah.
If I had to choose one, I'd undo. I'll give Eric the you can have the Tatum one. I would probably go with Butler because it takes care of a few other things that happened as well, right? So if we gave Butler a massive contract, maybe we would try to play harder ball with Tobias and his deal. Maybe we wouldn't have come to a contract terms. Maybe we'd have to do a sign and trade with Tobias instead. Maybe the Simmons camp would have gotten so upset they demanded a trade, which maybe wouldn't have been a bad thing because his values at its peak then. We could have gotten a lot for Simmons that year. So they could have, stopped the whole, folding the next season in the Atlanta year. That would have been avoided. That'd probably be my one right there.
My thing is with that is, like, during that time, like, you making moves, but we got one of the best records in the league.
Wait, which one? The Butler season?
We're still one of the best in the league. I'm just talking about from a standpoint of the reason why I said that is because it was a move that was made for a guy that you moved and didn't have success there, and the guy that you could have has had so much success. And at your expense. He's in your division.
I know. Yeah. No, if we're saying the whole Tatum thing, then that's hard. I mean, it's hard to turn down a top 5, top 10 player instead of a guy who didn't. I mean,
he was supposed to be back, then he had an injury, but I'm just saying, like, it wasn't.
Yeah, Fultz wasn't. He was a top player in the draft.
I'm saying, like, he was supposed to be like, but it wasn't like there were people that felt Tatum was number one. Like, that wasn't a surprise that people felt that way. People, there wasn't people saying that y'all should take him.
Mm-hmm.
It was a loaded draft that year. There were a lot of good guys that year. But yeah, I remember the time we were looking for an off-ball guard, a point guard who could also play off-ball, who could shoot off a catch and shoot.
That's what I'm saying. We were looking for a guy that could play off of Ben, and that's the one part I didn't really understand, was because we said we wanted a guy that could be a guard and could play off of Ben, but we got a guard that could play off of Ben but needed the ball in his hands. Like, I didn't really understand that, because if he had the ball in his hands, then that didn't really help Ben. Like, that's where I felt like, okay, if you have Ben and you want to get a guy on the wing, then Tatum or someone like that fits better.
Yeah.
But to me, when they got Fultz, I took it as if, because I didn't know much about Fultz until they started talking about him.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen him play in college. I didn't know. Then people started talking about it, so then I watched and paid attention. Like, oh, he can work. But to me, it came off as more of a possible replacement of Ben.
It was Ben Simmons' point guard insurance.
Yes.
So they weren't totally sure. I could see at the time there was like, well, if we get Fultz, we have the guy who can, let's say Ben starts to phase away from point guard, a guy who can be our point guard. But when Ben takes the ball up, it's a guy who can play on the side. But that all went to shit because Fultz's shot, he got the hitch and all that stuff happened. So, but he was shooting, I believe, 40% from 3 in Washington that year. So he had a 3-point shot. He just came and all that stuff happened, and just unfortunate. But imagine a guy like, Maxi's sort of like, a Fultz as far as handling it sometimes, not as good of a distributor, but a good shooter. Maxi and Ben would have worked out pretty good, I think. Yeah. Like Maxi now and what Ben was, that would have been a great mix, actually. So imagine having those two guys and Tatum and Embiid. And then that's crazy. What a great mix of offensive defense. But second for me was the Bridges trade, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to ask how high do you have that one?
Yeah, but did you feel that way when it happened?
I was happy when we drafted him.
I'm saying I don't think anybody would have thought the way Bridges has turned out. No one talked about that when it happened. They just talked about, Mikhail's mom, who worked for the Sixers, and how he was from Philly, and how that was wrong that they drafted him and traded him. Yes. No one talked about him helping the Sixers.
Mm.
That wasn't a topic of conversation. Now, he went and developed himself and became the player that he is in Phoenix, and now everybody's like, oh, we should have kept him. I don't know if he would have been that guy in Philly.
Maybe not.
We really don't know.
He got a lot of minutes with Phoenix to develop. And he
got a lot of minutes in a specific role, playing with certain guys, playing a certain way. As we've seen, he in Phoenix, he was a spot up shooter, make shot, but he did that in college. He could make shots and defend. That's how everybody seen him 3-and-D. But they also had a slashing, driving offense, and they don't have that in Philly.
Yeah, he would have been a corner shooter for us.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he would have been effective, but I actually think it worked out better for him going to Phoenix.
Yep. Yeah. So under the scope of what he is now, yes, I would rather have, the Bridges obviously would have been great, but no, at the time it was, devastating for the whole Philly side of that story, but not for the basketball side, because Zaire still, he fit well enough. It didn't look like it was a bad trade at the time.
Yeah, it's one of those things on draft night when you read up on the player, like, yeah, I like this guy. No, I like this is a good move for us.
Athletic defender, they both defend. I mean, he can develop a good 3-point shot. Okay, sure.
Yeah, but as you know, as we always say, 3-and-D, it's a premium in this league, and a lengthy wing like that.
I know. Yeah.
We've been searching ever since.
Yeah.